Welcome to THA Talks, for free thought and open minds. Hello, I'm Paul Obitelli and welcome to another edition of THA Talks, the alternative podcast show from the UK. Our talks include news, conspiracies, spirituality, the occult, science, history, art, philosophy, religion, and much more. If you'd like to check out our full archive, just go to www.thatalks.com to listen to or to download all our free content. And if there's anyone who'd like to contact us and give us some feedback or maybe recommend a guest for the show, you can email us at info@thatalks.com, or you can go to our website and contact us via the contact tab there. And don't forget, you can subscribe to the show via our RSS feed, and you can also find us on iTunes and Stitcher and many other podcast directories out there. Well, thank you, all of you, for tuning in again here onto THA Talks, wherever you may be, whenever it may be. It's always good to be back. I had a bit of a split reaction from last show we did with Jez Turner on fascism. What kind of got my attention is you hear so much kind of stuff thrown about out there about the likes of people like Nigel Farage, Donald Trump, Le Pen in France, and a few of these other kind of right-wing nationalist-rooted political movements, and they're often branded as fascists and Nazis. So I thought it would be quite interesting when I brought Jez on, because Jez is a far-right person. If there was anyone that you could describe as a fascist or as a Nazi in the political ideology, as you could see when he came on the show, it would be him. And I think you all could see the difference, that you can see that he is far-right and he is what would be close to be called a fascist, not the Nigel Farages, not the Donald Trumps. And I thought it was interesting because I had some reaction. Oh my gosh, this guy, and it was divided as well. I had a lot of good feedback as well from people saying it was very interesting. Some people thought it was interesting, didn't quite agree with everything, which I'm sure there was a lot of people out there that took that perspective. Others that said, great show, and so I thought it was interesting to have that split reaction there. I've made no secret of the fact that there's a lot of things about the alt-right that I agree with, a fair few things I don't agree with. But I think that's what's interesting about the movement. It is a very broad movement, although I think a lot of the far right within the movement like to think it is just the far right. I don't quite agree. I think it is a broad movement, and I think it's where there's just a lot of common ground in concerns what's going on with globalism at the moment. But I'm glad I got him on, and we will get him back on. I am, just to even the scales as well, I am currently looking for some communists to come on. Now, communism is quite a broad kind of spectrum when you talk about it. There's a lot of different types, as there is on the far right as well. This is what you look into this stuff. It's all very labelled and generalised, but there's a very broad spectrum with it all. And I do plan on bringing some of the far left onto the show. As I said last time, I've got no interest in groups that reject free speech, which some of them are out there, whatever they're called. They're usually known as Antifa, which are funded by quite a lot of groups, political groups at the moment, and they're trying to shut down free speech and that kind of thing. I'm not interested in having anyone on that. I mean, well, maybe I would do, just then I would be opinionated, because free speech is what this podcast is built upon. But no, I wouldn't really be interested in that. But regards to communists and people with that political ideology that are very anti-far right in their political ideology, I am very interested. So if there is anyone out there, I have got a few names in order. I'm speaking to people, so I'm pretty confident that will happen. But be my guest if you've got anyone out there that you think will do a good job there. Now, we won't be going to the other side of London for a surgeon, a dramaturge, because David Parry is still in the middle of a production called The Idiot, which I did actually go to see yesterday afternoon, which was very, very, very good. I enjoyed David's performance, and I thought there was a lot of great acting in the whole cast there. And I recommend that. It's being played at the Theatro Technis in Camden. You can get a ticket for £15 each, which is a great price. And if you want more information on that, just go to their website, www.theatrotechnis.com, and the performance is The Idiot. So I highly recommend you check that out. It's got a week left running, there in Camden, and it's worth checking out. Anyway, on to today's guest. We're kind of hitting this subject for the first time, which I'm quite excited about. This evening we'll be speaking with a young lady called Elizabeth Hobson. I first came across Elizabeth at David's Extremist Club. She'd done a talk there that was really interesting. She describes herself as an anti-feminist libertarian, and she does a lot of talk on female and male genital mutilation, which she strongly opposes. She's got a cool blog, elizabethhobson.wordpress.com, and she's very passionate about the subject, doing a lot of talks herself and write-ups. And feminism is something that I've wanted to get on the show for quite a while now. It's been a long time to come around to it, but we're here with it. And I'll give you an idea of her perspective. One of her blog titles was labelled Anti-Feminism is the New Feminism. And I know there's a lot of women out there that feel that way, despite how seemingly popular it is socially and on the mainstream and so on. I think there's a lot of controversy around it. Obviously, me and I think most of the men I know have great respect for women and equal rights in the modern world, equal opportunities, and so people can choose, have more choice about their lives, absolutely. But there's something fishy going on in some of this stuff. So, but I'm going to crack straight on, and we're going to go and meet Elizabeth, and I'm looking forward to this one. Elizabeth Hobson, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
How have you been then? I mean, have you been doing any more talks recently on the road, so to speak?
I've been quite busy. I gave my male genital mutilation talk at the London Forum after you saw me at Extremists Club. And last Tuesday, I was at a debate in Bath University called "The House Says Feminism is Outdated," which was interesting. That was my first debate.
Okay, so it's no secret that you're not a fan of feminism, or at least the way it is in today's day and age. How's about if you give us a little bit of a kind of a synopsis on what got you all into this and what made you so passionate about the subject?
Sure. Well, as far as feminism goes, I mean, I was born with a sort of passion for equality and justice. And so for a long time, I thought that made me a feminist. And, I was thinking about my earliest kind of impressions of feminism. And I remembered when I was maybe 14 being told about the suffragettes in school and how they fought for our right to vote, which was... There were a lot of omissions in it, I now see, because we were taught that. I remember learning about them chaining themselves to buildings, and I remember learning about them being arrested and going on hunger strike in prison. But what we were never told was about how they were terrorists. We weren't told about the bombs. We weren't told about their plot to assassinate the Prime Minister at the time. So I think that was some interesting omissions there. And around the same time as that, I remember hearing Germaine Greer saying that when people tell her they're not feminists, she says, "Why? Don't you think women should have rights?" And that was my impression of feminism. That's what I thought it was, and I agreed with it. And then when I became pregnant with my first child at about 19, I had this overwhelming kind of feeling of a bond with womankind. And so I did things like I was watching an awful lot of nature documentaries and reading a lot of David Attenborough and empathising with the mothers in the natural world. And I was also reading feminist literature. And I started talking to feminists, both online and at events. And it became quite clear to me fairly early that actually, my kind of dictionary definition of feminism was not welcome. Really, what you had to do to be welcomed into the movement was to have a real problem with men and to have a real problem with kind of freedom as well. And And, you know, you see that with the kind of, there are feminists, because what I like to say is that, you know, I'm an anti-feminist because I'm against feminism, but I'm not against every feminist.
Yeah.
And so there are feminists like Camille Paglia and Cathy Young and C.H. Summers, who I really respect. But they're all ostracized from the movement. You know, the mainstream of the movement hates them.
Right. It's almost like some of the people you say their job is to try and steer feminism in the right direction rather than do what they originally set out to do. And it's interesting what you said earlier, where you brought up the suffragettes. I think what from my research myself, it's like because you get the suffragettes, but that was the group, but there was the movement, which was the suffrage, wasn't it? And it's that seemed to be kind of like a natural cycle of life was changing. So there's the other really interesting omission, actually, is that the 1918 Representation of the People Act, which is lauded by feminists for bringing, I think it was 8 million women into the vote, actually brought 5 million men into the vote as well, who had been excluded because there were property qualifications. That's right, yeah.
Nobody talks about that.
Yeah, I think it's quite. I mean, I personally find it quite difficult. If it's easier for women, or even I think Milo, because he's gay, he gets a little bit easier because you can kind of slip in there with that. But for me personally, and I think women, it's very difficult to criticise feminism because obviously guys don't want to criticise something that is supposedly designed to protect women, because I believe most guys like protecting women and want to offer them that in society. So I've had it myself. Sometimes you don't want to criticise it because you feel like you're being a bigot. You know what I mean? That's kind of what it's. So I mean, what sort of? Have you had? I say that, but I think there's a lot of women I've seen on YouTube that get venomous reaction from feminists as well. So what about you? Do you find, have you been getting a backlash yourself?
To be perfectly honest, the worst backlash I got from feminists was when I did call myself a feminist.
Right.
You know, and then came out with opinions that were more based on equality and based on loving both men and women, you know, and standing up for, like, there's not many viler kind of altercations that I've seen online, other than when I've seen men saying that, you know, they are feminists. And then you get all these feminist women saying, you don't have the right to take that label, you know, you're not a woman, you don't understand, and all this kind of stuff, and getting really, really horribly aggressive about it. And I was standing up for the men, and the women absolutely hated that.
Yeah.
And, you know, told me to hand in my feminist card, which after a while I did.
Yeah. Yeah, and that, I mean, that must have been... Sorry.
Since I've become an anti-feminist, I haven't had a massive backlash, to be honest. And I've been surprised with how many women, you know, sort of mums in the schoolyard actually understand when you get talking to them about it, about the issues. Yeah.
I mean, it must have been... I find with stuff like this, when you do throw your shackles off, so to speak, you actually feel quite good. You kind of think, actually, I don't want to go back now. I feel I can say what I want to say. I don't have to bite my lip and, I'm not going to say that. Because especially, did you find you had a lot of friends that perhaps feminists, and it made very uncomfortable because you had to kind of lose a lot of friendships? Were you in that position at all? Or?
I've had altercations with friends, but I haven't really lost any.
Right.
I have to say, good. I've been quite lucky in that respect. I know other people who have.
Yeah. I think it's with a lot of the political spectrum at the moment, a lot of people don't support some of these movements from these ultra liberal movements, but they're just a bit afraid because they've got such a clique around them of friendships, and it's just difficult because I think if I go against what they think, my whole life's going to change, and I'll just lose all my friendships.
Yeah, well, it can be. I mean, if you look at someone like Neil Linden, who wrote a book called No More Sex War.
Yeah.
He was writing for various publications, and he was kind of a part of the whole Guardian set, and all of his friends turned against him completely, and he ended up losing access to his son for an awfully long time. who was then raised very badly by an alcoholic mother.
Yeah.
And, you look at Erin Pizzey, who was the founder of the first women's refuge shelter.
Yeah.
She refused to agree with the Duluth model of domestic violence, which basically sees any behaviour that a man might engage in a relationship as abusive, and nothing that a woman does as being abusive. And she's got a much more kind of holistic understanding of domestic violence, and that it is men and women. And she was treated abominably by feminists. They shot her dog at one point.
Oh my gosh.
There were like things through her letterbox, and she in the end had to move to America for a while to escape it all.
America? I thought it would be worse in America, wouldn't it?
Well, I think she went there and was
Mind you, a
quite
big place,
quiet.
yeah.
She just quietly wrote some books.
Yeah, it's
while
a
she
big
was there.
place as well, I suppose. So there's lots of different sort of areas out there. But
Mm.
yes, I mean, have you heard or seen the new movie The Red Pill, which was created by a feminist who, a little bit similar kind of situation like you perhaps, where she was a feminist and then she started to do a documentary, and she found that doing this documentary, she was losing faith in the, well, I guess not losing faith in the feminist movement, but starting to get more of a balance of the whole thing. And she changed the documentary. Immediately her funding was pulled. And then I think it was Milo. I always call him Milo because I can never pronounce his second name. But he actually helped her crowdsource so she could get the movie done. It's called The Red Pill. And
Absolutely, yeah. I've seen it twice, actually.
Right. I haven't actually seen it. I've seen the advert for it, but I haven't actually seen the whole thing. But it looked, just the commercial for it looked really powerful. It looked really strong.
It is an incredibly powerful movie, and it's for someone like me who sort of understands the men's issues, because she went in to investigate the men's rights movement and was expecting a lot of misogynists and bad people, and what she found was a lot of reasonable people who had concerns about the state of men and their place in society. And yeah, they changed her mind on the power balance between men and women. And she ends up, is it all right if I spoil the movie here? Bit of a spoiler.
Okay, well, you've given them a warning, so go ahead.
She ends up giving up the label feminist in the end, which was a beautiful moment for all of us. But I mean, it's a movie that doesn't have any new information in for the kind of seasoned men's rights activist or anti-feminist. But it's beautiful to see the construction of a feminist. But also, it's two things. Firstly, it's a marker in time, because I firmly believe that we're at a sort of turning point in the gender war, where we are going to start seeing men as human beings and start getting behind causes that make their lives better. And also, it's a great tool for red pilling the rest of society. It comes out on March the 7th on DVD and Netflix. And it's going to be our job as MRAs and anti-feminists to make sure that all of our friends and family see it, because, you can ask people in your life to sit down for, I think it's an hour and 27 minutes or something like that. And I think it will change their minds. It's that powerful.
Right. I mean, it's the way you've described it. That's really good, and it's good that if that is the new direction, that's great. But something in me still is disappointed the fact there's still that division there. Because even when I think it was Men Go Your Own Way or something, which I actually think they're idiots as well, to be honest. I respect some of the men's rights acts. If you've got any activist movements, then you need to have an opposite. It's also, everyone's got to look after themselves. So it's kind of disappointing that you have that division to start with. And some of the McGow, whatever they're called, Men Go Your Own Way, they are misogynists. You know what I mean? So it's almost like the people that created this really horrible version of feminism has done its job in a way, in terms of there is this division now. And that's the thing that disappoints me in terms of that. You've got this division, and I guess now feminism has actually got a job to do, isn't it? Because there's that division. It's you're left in a situation where we've either got to try and build a bridge and get rid of that division again, which is probably the best solution, or there's got to just have those movements? Or do you find that it would be better to get rid of any feminism and male, and just all of us live in the same pot? What do you think about that?
Well, I mean, I think that what you're referring to with MGTOW is what I would call the misogynistic shift.
Yeah.
And it's the tendency for misogyny or disaffection towards females to show a net increase over time when the force of feminist innovation makes itself felt in a society. So, there is misogyny in MGTOW. Not all MGTOWs are misogynist, and as a movement, I think it has some power to change society. You know, if you get an awful lot of men opting out, then I think at some point women are going to go, what's gone wrong, and maybe change their behaviour. But I mean, I've probably more than backlash from feminists. As an anti-feminist, I've experienced a backlash from MGTOW types, and I've had, men telling me that I'm some kind of sadist because I've had children with a man, and that puts him in a very vulnerable situation. And I'm like, yeah, but it's not a vulnerable situation because, I'm not one of these women that's going to take his children away from him. But they won't listen to that. And, a lot of my friends as well have got stories about MGTOWs saying incredibly offensive things. And they don't trust women at all. And it's a shame. But I think it is a response to feminism. And I don't think feminism is the answer. I think that egalitarianism is the answer, maybe.
Yeah. I mean, I when I first came across some of their content, it's actually quite amusing. They're quite, because they do use a bit of humour, and it makes you laugh, and kind of it brings a let's get the lads together kind of thing. So I can understand why a lot of guys like it and enjoy it. But then I watched a bit more of it, and I thought, well, now you're getting a bit nasty. Now it's it just goes a bit too far. You know what I mean? And it's, as I said, it just seems to be the instigators of this thing to begin with. Seems to, they're rubbing their hands together with all this division, but it's great what you're doing, and more people like that, it can only improve the situation, and that's a good thing, and bring a bit more unity. Some of the work you really go into is the female and male genital mutilation. So let's go into that a little bit.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't look particularly at female genital mutilation. I'm dead against it. But obviously, we have our law specifically against that in our country. And even in several African countries, it's now banned, which is fantastic. However, the problem that we really have, and not just sort of in this country, also in the States, it's bigger. But also just generally around the world, we've got 7 cut men for every single cut woman. And that is what I'm trying to work to change at the moment. Right.
And so what is it about? I mean, for me personally, if a guy's been circumcised, it's very casual. It's, some guys get circumcised, it's no big deal. But some of your work suggests that it is a big deal. What is it? Give us a sort of an outline of that.
Well, I mean, for me, it's a very simple kind of issue of bodily autonomy and self-determination, which I believe in very strongly. And, if it's wrong to do to women or girls, then it's wrong to do to boys as well.
Yeah.
And, there are possibly a majority of men who are circumcised and just think, oh, well, that's what it is, and that's no big deal. But there is, at the very least, a minority who suffer terribly with it. So if you look at Tim Hammond's Global Survey of Circumcision Harm, that was a survey done on 1,000 men around the world, all about the harms that they've experienced. And I've got a little list here, which is not exhaustive. There's far more in it, but it's sort of some of the ones that I found particularly concerning. 10% had partial or total loss of the penile body. 56% had little to no shaft skin mobility on erection. 45% had hair along the mid to upper shaft causing friction during sex. 67% reported an insensitive glans. 75% reported a dry or keratinized glands requiring lubricants before sex. 31% reported erectile dysfunction, with circumcised men being 4.5 times more likely to take pharmaceuticals for that. 6% reported penile bleeding during sex. 8% that the scar is painful. 27% that the scar is numb. And now, of course, that doesn't include the boys who do die as a result of the operation. That's not at all unknown. Then you've got the emotional kind of fallout. So in the survey, 71% felt anger, 72% felt frustration, 37% felt shame, 55% felt betrayed by lack of protection from harm by mother, 50% betrayed by a lack of protection from harm by father, and 73% that their human rights were violated. 62% reported that their condition impedes their sexual relationships, 32% that it adversely affects their relationship with their mother, 29% that it adversely affects their relationship with their father, 65% that it causes them to distrust the medical profession, 33% that it causes them to feel unsafe in their society, and 36% of that 1,000 have sought help or treatment for the harm that they've been subjected to as a result. So, there are real harms there that we should all be concerned about.
So, I mean, thinking about that, maybe it's because that the female version of that is a bit more kind of, well, you think a bit more ouch when you think of it, whereas obviously the foreskins hasn't got as much nerves in it, but also because of that, it kind of happens more often. So you're seeing,
I mean, that is a bit of a myth, to be honest, and it's a myth that's perpetuated by feminists. Actually, there are several types of both female genital mutilation and male genital mutilation, and the most common form of male genital mutilation is far more intrusive and severe than the most common forms of FGM. Right. So the most or the sort of least bad form of FGM is pretty much a pinprick to the clitoris, which is still very wrong, but it's physiologically much less severe than taking, the whole foreskin off.
Yeah. Right, and I didn't know that. No, so do we have any idea on certain countries, nations that have more? I know that it's obviously. I'd imagine in Israel you get a lot of it because it's a Jewish tradition. I think it's also a Muslim tradition in some areas. So it's very much a religious thing. But do we have a picture on say Western nations how much of it there is going on around the world? Or
sure, yeah. Well, it is both the Jews and the Muslims practice it widely. Yeah. Muslims in kind of the Middle East and Africa tend to do it as a coming of age ritual between kind of ages 8 and 10. But when they come to the West, they tend to do it to newborns. There's also some very old forms of Christianity that practice it in Africa. But in the sort of Western world, we're talking very low numbers, really. It's kind of 6%. Right. Around that for most of the European countries. But in America, it's about 50%, which is steadily declining, slowly but steadily. But it varies state to state. So some states, virtually no one will be circumcised, and in some states, virtually everyone is.
Well, it seems, on this show, I've always defended Christianity because I think it kind of gets a raw deal at the moment out there with the politically correctness kind of stuff, in my opinion. But I must say, you've got to criticise it sometimes, and it just seems to be this, the three Abrahamic religions. It has this thing about sex which it wants to oppress it and stuff, and perhaps it's come from just old, ancient, very paranoid views. We all know that sex is something sacred, and it's not good to just sort of throw it out there willy-nilly like a lot of people do. That's a conservative kind of view on that, and that's all fair enough. Perhaps it was a medieval kind of OTT way of keeping it down, but do you have any views on the religious aspect of it? Is that what you think it just comes down to? Or, I mean, that's my view. What do you think?
You know, in Europe, it's kind of a religious thing, and it's a mark of cultural identity, really. In America, it's very much a cultural thing, but even there, it did sort of come from a very religious kind of foundation. So in 1845, a man called Edward Dixon released a study claiming that the procedure cures masturbation. And on the back of that, you had this bloke called John Harvey Kellogg, who invented cornflakes and was also a doctor who was absolutely dead against masturbation and thought it caused all manner of ailments, like literally anything. I've got a book by him here called Plain Facts for the Old and Young, which is a really interesting, fascinating piece of history. And in the back, he's got a section especially for boys, and he has these anecdotal stories to put them off masturbation. And it's sort of, he talks about these boys and men who come to see him, and they're suffering with all manner of diseases. And, you know, one of them just seems depressed, but he's absolutely convinced that it's all because they've been masturbating. And one of them ends up blowing his brains out shortly after seeing him. So it's very tragic.
Yeah, it's it is that's the dark side of those kind of religions and stuff. And the thing is, I think it when I think about stuff like that in religion, and anything like when they say, oh, you know, if you're gay, surely you should die, or whatever. If a man lay with another man, surely he would die. I mean, you've obviously got to look at that context all those years ago where life was really raw, dog eat dog, and you did get stoned to death if you stole something or whatever. You know, it was a really gruesome time. So obviously back then, something that we'd look at now and just, you know, oh, don't show yourself naked in the middle of the street or whatever, and that would be just common sort of decency or whatnot. Today we can view it like that, whereas it just seems, even today, a lot of these traditions that were just they were created 2,000 years ago. I'm trying to sort of find the best way to describe this. They were created 2,000 years ago, so why are they still here? Do you know what I mean? It's just some of that within religion, it just sticks, and it's come from a long era, and it doesn't do itself any favors because it's difficult to defend it sometimes, you know.
That's kind of what's quite interesting about Christianity, and talking about this issue specifically, is that there's actually a book called the Gospel of Thomas, which is it's non-canonical. So it's not in the Bible because it's not recognised by Roman Catholics, Protestants, or Eastern Orthodox Christians because there was some debate over who wrote it. But it actually says that his disciples said to him, "Is circumcision useful or not?" To which Jesus replied, "If it were useful, their father would produce children already circumcised from their mother."
Interesting.
So, yeah, it would have been very interesting to see the state of America, particularly with this issue, if that had remained in the book.
Do you, if you don't mind me asking, obviously you don't have to say, are you religious yourself? Are you a Christian or?
I'm not, no, I'm an atheist.
Right, okay. I just thought I'd check, going on about all Christianity, thought I'd double check. Yeah, so I mean that's the where it all comes from, I guess. So, but I mean, what are your views on some of the other sort of female activists out there? Not female activists, feminist activists out there, like Milo and Karen Strawn. She's quite good she's got a great YouTube channel. Do you know any of these people? Have you worked with them before, or have you got any plans to?
Yeah, I mean, Milo, I've had a problem with for a long time because he actually wrote an article about circumcision that was saying it's all fine, it's just grooming, basically.
Right. He hasn't been popular at the moment as Milo, is he?
I feel quite sorry for him at the moment, to be honest, but there we go.
Yeah, I mean, well, I think he was pretty unfair. Well, he said some stupid things, but I think there's so many people that despise him, and because he's a cracking, really good debater, they just wanted to take him down. But he does, I don't agree with everything he says, but yeah.
Yeah, I think also what we saw with what he said in particular was quite clearly to me the result of someone trying to deal with a trauma.
Yeah.
To be honest, which is what's the particularly kind of sad aspect to the whole story. But yeah, Karen Strawn is just incredible. I love her to bits.
Yeah.
She was one of the first kind of people I started watching when I got into anti-feminism, and she's so interesting and so knowledgeable, and she's got great insight. So yeah, I love her. And I was actually on the Honey Badgers radio show. When was it? It was a couple of days ago.
Oh, great.
Not with her, with Brian Martinez, and Alison popped in briefly and anointed me an honorary honey badger at the request of one of my friends in the comments box. So that was lovely.
Brilliant. Yeah, she's I've checked out some of her videos, and she's just another a great debater. I never forget that one she done. What's the guy on the Young Turks, the big Turkish guy? What's his name?
What's his name?
Kent, not Kek. That's the
Kenk.
That's it, Kenk. She had a debate with him. A lot of the subjects what we're talking about now, and she just, if there was ever an advert that you didn't need feminism to be a strong and smart woman doing the business, she was it. She was basically just completely wiping the floor with him. Because she was right, everything he was saying, and he was losing his rag, getting angry, and she was just wiping the floor with him. Yeah,
that's also interesting. That kind of reminds me of experiences that I've had, which is that male feminists are very cowed in the presence of feminists, and when you get feminists saying, you have no right to call yourself a feminist and stuff like that, they straight away back down, and they're like, oh, I'm so sorry, I bow to your superior knowledge and experience, and women are all amazing. And then when they start talking to anti-feminist women, it's like all this bottled up aggression suddenly comes out. I don't know if that was what was going on at that time, but it has been quite a common experience, I think.
Yeah, well, in the past, I'd say I've kind of identified as a feminist purely because it's just kind of like an autopilot thing. You kind of, the way society is, it feels progressive, cool, and good to women to be a feminist and stuff. So most guys are happy to indulge in that when they first hear the sound of it. But it's kind of, I started to then feel a little bit of the venom from the feminist side of things, and just even when it's not something that's sort of thrown at you directly, it's just this kind of, you don't like masculinity very much, do you? You don't like men being men kind of thing. And once you get a taste of it, once you kind of, especially when you have it thrown at you, which I have a few times, you never forget that scent, and then you start to see it for what it is. And I've got it's like what I was saying earlier. Once you shake those shackles off, and you think, no, I can see now. I'm not going back in there. And it's and you just think, no, I'm sorry. I'm not a feminist, and I don't need to be to show women respect.
Yeah, well, all of their theories, it's like Karen Strawn says in the Red Pill movie. She says, you don't hate men. They've just named everything bad after men. Like patriarchy theory, toxic masculinity, rape culture is all about men's behavior. And of course, they named everything good, or the great protector after women, i.e. feminism, and if it was about equality, maybe it would have been a different name. Maybe it would have been egalitarianism or equalism or something like that.
Well, I think what it comes down to today is, in the past, obviously the way society was, women had a very kind of restricted lifestyle, and the world around them was growing bigger and bigger. So obviously men had the freedom to go out into it because they'd always been playing the lead role in society up until that time. But before it got more, it got bigger, it wasn't that great anyway, you know what I mean? So, but once it got bigger, obviously we had a bigger society, women's lives and input to society needed to change. And I think most people can see and respect that, but it just seems to be now, it's not a case of giving women an opportunity and say, do you want a family and settle down and look after your kids and have a guy that will work harder to go out and earn more money? Or do you want a career and maybe just have less of that and go out there and make a career yourself? It's not like that anymore. Now they want to force every woman to live the lifestyle of feminists, and that seems to be what it's come now. So actually it's damaging women because they've got less option, and especially if you're not earning a lot of money, women now struggle to find a family and have kids. So it's not a great not a great situation. I think it's I mean, I take it you're familiar with the old cultural Marxism thing.
Oh, of course, yeah, absolutely.
So do you see it expanding beyond just feminism then, and do you see what's going on in society? What's your overall views of that?
Right. Well, I mean, if I can go back to what you were saying a minute ago, I would say, that feminism has sort of evolved from a fight for women's legal and social equality to one for special privileges and affirmative action. And I do think it harms women, and not just, because they're trying to push women into a kind of feminist way of life, but also because it harms men. And men and women are swimming in the same pond, and you can't poison half of the pond because we're too connected. But in terms of cultural Marxism, it's terrifying, especially what's going on in universities at the moment. And of course, universities pump out all of our government, our justice system, our educators, our media. Everyone who's got power and influence is coming from university. And, I saw an activist on Twitter earlier burning a sign that said free speech.
Yeah, that doesn't shock me at all.
I mean, and how sad is that?
Yeah.
It's incredible. But
so what do you what's your take on the whole Trump thing then? I mean, this is obviously expanding the subject out there further. Do you support him, or are you a hater?
I initially was wanting Ted Cruz to get the nomination, and then there was all the issue over him being Canadian, and I was thinking, if he was to be elected and then it came out that he really wasn't American, we'd be stuck with Hillary, and that would be fucking awful. Yeah. So at that point, I started coming round to Trump, and by the time the election happened, I was very much like, he has to win. He has to win. And mainly because I've trusted him to elect someone good to the Supreme Court justice position.
Yeah.
A real constitution originalist, because I'm a bit of a sort of Americanophile, if I can coin a term.
Yeah.
And I love their constitution. I think it's fabulous.
Yeah, I love America. I love America.
The idea of Hillary getting in, she would have absolutely stuck a constitution revisionist in there, and it would have just been unlimited growth of government power forever more, really. So I was very pleased with him, and I've been sort of pleased over and over again. It's incredible that he's got in and just did what he said he was going to do. It's like, what is going on? He's not a politician at all. And I thought it was fantastic. About a week after he'd been in, he had a phone call with Saudi Arabia and got them to agree to support safe zones in the Middle East, which now is the solution to the refugee crisis. Right. And it would enable us to help far more people. And so I think that's, if and when that kind of comes about, and I don't know what kind of support they mean, but that's going to be the greatest kind of humanitarian score since vaccinations or something.
Yeah.
And then I've been particularly pleased when he asked the funding to a load of violence against women programs, which are really, ideological shitstorms that ruin people's lives and just suck up money for feminists.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, I think that the interesting thing is 53% of the white female vote in America voted for Trump. So that's good, because all the feminists, if they say to you, you know, oh, you know, you like Trump because you're against feminism. Well, actually, the majority of the white female voted for Trump. So gives you a perspective there, doesn't it? I mean, I found personally he didn't patronise women as much as Hillary did. Hillary was almost like, oh, you know, you need me, you women need me, and Trump said, no, you don't, you don't need me. You're fine by yourself. I'll give you the same opportunities because you're not, you know, you don't need that. Women are perfectly okay to kick off by themselves, you know.
There was a fantastic moment in one of the debates when Hillary said, this is the man who actually said that a woman should be paid the same as a man if she does as good a job. I think that's quite close to what it was. And I just kind of wet myself laughing. I could not believe she'd actually said it, you know. But Trump, in all of his kind of history of business dealings and, you know, appointments and stuff like that, and, you know, also appointing Kellyanne Conway to be the organizer. What's that called? Her role? I've forgotten. In his campaign
manager.
He's clearly campaign manager. That's it. Yeah. He's clearly not sexist. You know, he clearly has an awful lot of respect for women. But I mean, saying that, I think that's another very clear marker in time that we are changing as a society, because I think 2 or 3 years ago, you know, his saying nasty things to some women and also the whole grabbing by the pussy comment would have absolutely disqualified him.
Yeah. Well, people
are so sick of feminism now that, you know, they're...
The media as well, I think what he's doing now, and it's interesting how he's playing the media, because what he tends to do is he'll kind of throw something out there knowing damn well how they're going to try and rip it to shreds to attack him, and then they do it, and then he kind of picks up the pieces and exposes them for what, I think it was with that Sweden thing where he said, like what happened he was talking about terrorist attacks, what happened in Sweden the other day, and they said, Trump claims there was a terrorist attack in Sweden. Like, it was almost like they took the bait. Of course he didn't think that they were going to do that. He knows if there wasn't an event, no one's just going to think up this event that never happened. He knew what was going to happen. So, and then what happened is there was a documentary on Sweden for the next 2 weeks after that. Everyone was talking about all the riots in Sweden, which was ignored. There was the members from their government that was on interviews around the UK trying to defend the fact that they won't disclose the ethnicity of like rape stats and this out there because they think it's racist. Well, how are you meant to monitor the crimes or what's coming into your country if you're not doing that? And all this is exposed because of what Trump done there. And then people wonder why some people support Trump. It's because of that. He's doing something. Whether his intention is 100% pure or not, we don't know. I mean, it'd be great to be a fly on the wall, but he's doing something. I think, you know, and that's why I sort of back the guy for now, at least. I mean, I'm ready to jump on him the moment he does something wrong, but at the moment, I'll be honest, I'm quite jealous he's not running the UK. If I'm to be perfectly honest with you, you know. Yeah. Are
you planning to come and see him when he does his rallies in the UK?
Well, yes, I would be up for that. I'm a bit worried that you're going to get the old anti-free speech mob that's going to come down and try and pretend that we're all a bunch of violent Nazis that want to kill everyone, and they'll come and make sure that's the case. But if it's like an event that's close by, I think I would like to go and support that, because I think you see enough from the other side doing it, and you know. But yeah.
But I mean, Antifa and Black Bloc are absolutely, they're very concerning, and I don't know if you've seen the petition going round to designate them terrorists, which I fully support. But I had my first run-in with them, actually, when I gave my circumcision talk at the London Forum. Oh, yeah,
I did hear about that from, because we just had Jez come on the show last time. And as I said, I mean, we had Jez on the show, you know, very as far right as you can get and very controversial, but his views, that's the whole thing about I got criticised for having him on the show. And I'm sure what me and you have spoken about on the show, there's a lot of people out there that are kicking kicking that, not wanting to hear this because it's, oh, you say this, but I'm happy to bring anyone else on to come on the show that completely disagrees with you, disagrees with me, and has a completely different opinion. That's what free speech is. But,
I mean, that's what I didn't understand. I was just like, why do they want to shut people down? Why don't they want to come in and put their perspective across?
Yeah.
Try and change some hearts and minds. But instead, they stand outside, and I went outside for a cigarette, and there's like about 50 police officers standing outside, and then all these protesters. And I was like, oh, you're all right, to one of the police officers. And he was like, yeah, what are you doing here? And I was like, I'm here for the conference. And he said, like, don't say that too loud. And I was like, what, are they here for us? And he said, yeah. And a little later, they were all chanting, if it wasn't for the coppers, you'd be dead. And releasing smoke bombs, and they ended up managing to sort of get the hotel to completely shut down all of the doors for I don't know how long, and eventually the police got a dispersal order, so they all had to leave for a certain amount of time, and then the police escorted us all to the trains and taxis, which is just crazy. And it's like, I mean, we found the tweet because the London Forum is a little bit alt-right for me.
Yeah. Oh, it is. Yeah.
It's a little bit. Some of the views expressed there are a little bit extreme.
Yeah.
But if it wasn't for the intimidation, I'd certainly be interested to go and sort of listen and maybe discuss things with people.
Yeah. Absolutely.
As it happens with that, I wouldn't be. But I mean, when we saw the tweet that had been sent out by some of the Antifa, it said, come down because these people support Trump. And I was like, fuck, like, he's so not that bad, and they're all shouting Nazis at us and stuff. And it's like, they don't have a clue.
Well, this is just it. It's the difference is you can debate with people like that. If you seek to shut down free speech, then you lose a bearing on who is permitted free speech. You can't say we have free speech, but only if you think this way or that way. It's like what you say. I mean, there's some views out there that are very, very hard right, and the way you do this is you debate them and you put your point and you debate the points there. If you do that, then if any movement that springs and grows from that is going to be a lot more genuine and powerful because it's going to win a lot of arguments. If you just suppress a movement and shut them up, they're going to go unchallenged and they'll grow just because people are a bit fed up that they can't speak, and I think to a degree that's why there is so much people moving to the far right at the moment, because they can actually talk to them more than they can these sort of on the left and stuff, because you just cannot speak without, as you say, me and you supporting Trump for the last 10 minutes here, some people would regard us as Nazis or far right just for doing that. So as a result, if we did speak to the Jezes of the world from the far right and they kind of say, well, to be honest, we understand what you're saying, it's difficult not to say, well, I tell you what, I don't agree with everything you say, but at least I can speak, and that's what's happening at the moment all across Europe, and people wondering why these movements are growing. It's because, from the left, and I've got some left-wing friends, I've got nothing wrong with certain left-wing philosophies and ideas at all, everything's got its place. But I must say, it's just so intolerant.
It needs to be a conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah. I call myself a right-leaning libertarian, but I've got a lot of left-wing friends as well. And in my ideal society wouldn't be a right-leaning libertarian society. It would be a society where we're all in conversation and we all work together.
Yeah, absolutely.
But the thing is about the sort of aims of people like Antifa and the far left and the cultural Marxists, their kind of ideal situation is to have all right-wing thought completely banned. And the thing about that is that it leaves people vulnerable because, we've got the internet now. You can't completely shut down discussion of anything. It is going to go on. And if you can't expose it to the light of day through debate and discussion, then it becomes a lot more powerful. And, people start saying, well, what is it that they're scared of? that we can't talk about this. You know, it suddenly becomes like, you know, well, it must be true, otherwise they wouldn't be scared of us talking about it.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
It gives it a kind of glow, and, you know, anyone who's kind of charged with hate speech or anything like that becomes a martyr, so it just makes it far more powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I couldn't agree more. And I mean, I'm hoping we're seeing a bit of a chat, I think, because of the media, the way they've been acting over the last few months. In fact, last couple of years, actually, people are starting to see through the rhetoric and starting to see through this behaviour, and hopefully they're waking up to it, and we can see a bit of positive change, hopefully, in the next couple of years. That's what I'm hoping for, anyway.
Well, they've done it all so much. They've called so many people misogynists and so many racists and so many Nazis that these words have just lost all of their power, you know, and it's possibly unfortunate because it means that you are at a disadvantage if you want to call out an actual racist, misogynist or Nazi.
Exactly, yeah. It's
no one's going to hear you.
Yeah. Boy cried wolf.
But yeah, you know, as far as a tool for shutting people up, which it has been, I think it's really failing now. Yeah. And hilariously, they can't even see it because they're just doubling down and doing it even more.
Yeah. Well, it's for me, I say to my friend, if you're getting into a debate like that and someone calls you a racist, don't even defend the fact you're a racist, because to be a racist, they've got to prove that you've actually said something that's racist. So just ignore it. They're not going to be able to keep pursuing that argument because you're not racist. They're just using it so that you go on your back foot when you got no reason to get on your back foot, you know? So I tend to just completely ignore it. I won't defend that. I just say, just brush it aside and just keep, you know, expressing the point, the truth, because then it doesn't work. But that's what they use. It's kind of like a sort of a psychological fascism, just, you know, sort of don't speak, they just want to stop you from speaking so that you can't express certain point of views. And it's a big problem in the West at the moment because you get a lot of people out there, and I'm telling you now, I know this for a fact, you get a lot of people out there, and it's a little bit what I mentioned earlier, they're in their little movement and they've got their friends around them and they know exactly, they'll be listening to me and you right now and agreeing with most of what we're saying, but they're petrified to say anything to their friends in the workplace, at home, because, and you can understand, because their lives would completely shatter if all their friends left them and thought they were this hideous racist, Nazi, whatever, misogynist, just because they're holding these views that aren't in this PC kind of thing at the moment. And it is scary, petrifying for them, you know.
I actually have a friend on Facebook, and he was, you know, a pro-leaver in the Brexit referendum, but he decided not to vote at all because he couldn't face going into work and admitting it, and he didn't want to lie. Yeah. So he didn't vote, so he could go into work and say, "Oh no, didn't vote," rather than voting with his heart. Absolutely,
I think there was a lot of people like that, and that's why I think I do like what happened with Brexit and Trump, because I think it has given people a little bit more bravery to say, hang on, you know, there's another argument here. You know, there's other people that don't think the way you do, and just because it's on the BBC and CCM where they have this projection where everyone automatically thinks that way, that we should automatically believe anything a feminist says, otherwise we're a misogynist. And that's what kind of the BBC and the CNNs, all these guys, they push that out there so people think, I can't say that because otherwise I'm a misogynist. And it's like, well, actually, no, that doesn't mean, it's just that's what that program that you're watching every day is pumping into your brain and making you think that way, you know. But yeah, we're kind of pressing towards that time now, and it's been a brilliant conversation. I'd love to go on for another hour. Is there anything that you're doing that you'd like to let our listeners know about? Any events coming up, or any means of the way of contacting you, or any work that you'd like them to check out? The floor is yours.
Yeah, well, absolutely. I mean, if anybody wants to contact me to have a go, or indeed to say something nice, either way, they can always email me. I am Anti-Fembot, that is ANTIFEMBOT @gmail.com. And I haven't got any big events planned at the moment, but I'm doing something exciting, which I'm not 100% sure that I should tell you, but I will anyway because I'm so excited. I'll be interviewing with some friends Philip Davies quite soon.
Oh, brilliant.
So Philip Davies is the member of Parliament, Conservative member of Parliament for Shipley, and he is an MRA, and he basically goes to Parliament and
I know the guy you're talking about, and he's absolutely brilliant.
he responds to feminist proposals with like, well, this is great, but shouldn't it be gender neutral to protect men as well? And he just gets jeered at by the whole of the House. Actually, it's disgraceful. But my friends and I of the Liberty Bells, actually, that's what I should be telling you about. Me and a group of friends have started a YouTube channel called the Liberty Bells, and there's nothing on it at the moment. We filmed our films, but they're in production, and that'll be discussing men's issues and challenging feminist narratives. And so it's part of that will be why we're interviewing Philip Davies. And if you want to check out some stuff on Twitter about him, we've got a hashtag called #LadiesForPhilipDavies.
Right. Okay. No, that sounds. I'll be interested to check that out definitely myself, and it'll be brilliant to have you back on the show, Elizabeth, because it's been a really good talk. I'm sure there's a lot of our listeners out there that are going to be digging their nails into their desks, not happy with what we're talking about, but a lot of them agree. And that's the beauty of it. I mean, I do try to keep balance, but I sometimes have to just let myself be known as well. And we always get others on to come and have a different opinion. And I'm sure there's some feminists out there that might disagree with what we're saying and whatnot.
If we want to get like a feminist on here, and I'll come on as well, and we can have a discussion.
Oh, that's
three-way discussion. That would be great.
That sounds like a brilliant idea, and I think we may very well look into that definitely. But yeah, it'd be brilliant to have you back on. It's been a great chat, and I wish you all the luck with your work and the interview coming up. And please keep us posted and stay in touch.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
And that was Elizabeth Hobson. I personally really enjoyed that chat, and I would very much like to have her back on. And I think she had a great idea about having a little bit of a debate with a feminist, that we can listen to both sides of the spectrum. I think we need to do that a bit more on this show, maybe. That's a great idea, Elizabeth. So we may very well crack on with that idea. Please let me know what you thought about that. As usual, it's always good to hear your feedback. And I think for me, what we've been touching on again today in a broader spectrum of the subject is the word cultural Marxism. Now, a lot of people I've heard, cultural Marxism doesn't exist. That's just a word to object to progression. I've heard that kind of thing before. Well, let's just say it's a word used to describe a view of what people are perceiving is happening, which is that a lot of individuality and natural perceptions about who we are in society is being narrowed. For example, male and female, the difference between a male and female is being narrowed and put down together. The controversy of race, we can't talk about racial divisions or differences because that's racist. So we must mix that into race doesn't exist. So sexual identity is becoming less different. Racial differences don't exist. And all this kind of oneness, we're all just this one in this one big pot. And if I've for many years, as you know on the show, David's always calling me the conspiracy man. And the reason for this is because for a long time I've researched and been very interested and concerned about what some people may describe as the New World Order, which is the view that there's a global elite which are trying to create a one world state. And I think we can all see that's going on now. And it's a case of, do we trust it? And I think what cultural Marxism is, for me, and I'm just sort of putting this in and out of perspective, is an experiment and a formula used to make that transition much easier for them, and to make it that there's less individual power within that state to challenge the state god, which it means people are more reliant on the state for their identity than themselves, because there's no real. It's deroot everyone, pull out of the roots up, and then they're all holding on to the state because the state's the only thing that can really give them any form of identity, form of belonging, anything. And I think you've got to do a bit of research and where we've come from in the history of how important some of those roots are, and maybe they're worth fighting for. But that's my views on that, on cultural Marxism, because I think it's very relevant about what we were talking about and why people like Elizabeth and I have some of the views that we do have. Obviously, that's my perception. I'm not totally speaking for Elizabeth there. When she comes back on the show, we'll definitely extend on that, I'm sure. But what I will leave you with is just a reminder, with all the politics going on like crazy in Europe and America and all over the world, we've all got our opinions. I've got my big gob, and I air my views on this show, as I should do. Just to remind you, the show doesn't necessarily hold a political direction. It's obviously, I'm the man behind the show, and I have mine. But David Parry, he has his views. Shana Collins has her views. And we'll be getting John White, who's recently been on the show. He'll be coming on the show to help us out as well and doing some hosting with us and contributing to the show. He also has his opinions, and we're open to new perspectives. As long as people believe in free speech and in debate and information, getting information out there, we are passionate about having them on the show. And if you're really into it, we're passionate about you coming on and helping and contributing to our little movement we've got here. So yeah, I just thought I'd throw that out there, and it's been great. I've really enjoyed it again here on THA Talks. Please keep telling your friends about the show, keep linking the show, and more importantly, keep downloading the show. And till the next time, stay strong, stay brave, and I'm going to be looking forward to speaking with you really soon. Cheers, bye.